Is it profitable to invest in Airbnb properties in Turkey? Is it safe? Is it legal? Will I get any bookings if I invest in Airbnb in Turkey? Or should I just stick to the long-term rentals? So these are some of the questions we'll be looking at in this video. Stay tuned. Let's get into it. So let's take a look at the first question. What should investors do? Should they invest in Airbnb options? Should they look at long-term rental properties? Or should they, when they have a property, they should not do anything with that property in terms of renting it out? They should just leave it empty and then use it whenever they fly in and so on. So it stays empty for the most part. What are the different options that we have? So with these three main options, when we take a look at the first one, let's look at the doing nothing option. What are some of the consequences or some of the pros and cons with that? So this is the easiest option, right? You don't do anything and you leave it empty as it is. But leaving it empty has some issues, right? So for example, when you leave an apartment empty, the air needs to be aired out. Apartments, they need to be aired out in Turkey, especially. You need to open the windows, let some fresh air in. And the other thing is that you need to keep an eye on things, obviously, whether there's any leaks coming from above, from below, there's any, plumbing issues even if you've shut off the water, things can happen. Things can leak in from other apartments and so on. So that needs to be tested. Even some of the appliances that you're using, for example, the heating, the water, all those things need to be turned on every now and then. So that is one of the issues about leaving it empty. You still need to look after the apartment. You still need to pay somebody or yourself or somebody to, appoint somebody to go and do those things from time to time. Every couple of months or, every 3 to 4 months, that needs to be done minimum, right? The second option is long-term rental. So when we take a look at long-term rental, what are some of the things that come across, right? So first thing that comes to my mind is when you think of long-term rental is that what are the tenant and landlord laws involved, right? What are your rights as a landlord? What rights do your tenants have? So in Turkey, what happens, and usually this is, across the world, tenants have a lot of rights. They have a lot of rights, and this is fair, of course. But in certain cases, that puts a landlord at a disadvantage. So, for example, in Turkey, you cannot remove a tenant, for example, right? Even after they have been paying, as long as they're paying the rent, and they're paying it on time, even if the contract has finished, right? You've set a 1-year contract, let's say, unless you have given them due notice, which is usually 2 to 3 months before the contract ending, you let them know, and you need to have a valid reason. The valid reason being that you yourself as a landlord is planning to move into the apartment, and you want to use the apartment yourself. That needs to be said when you want to take over the apartment, right? So you cannot just remove a tenant for any reason because the rent is too low and so on. So that's the number one reason, is that the tenant laws gives them a lot of rights. So you cannot easily replace tenants and change them and so on. So once you have the tenant in there, you better be sure that this is going to be a good tenant, that they're paying on time. Even if they don't pay, there's not a lot you can do in terms of, you need to go through the legal procedures, and that can take ages. That can take over a year. So you could be, stuck with a tenant who is in there, and you just have no income coming in for a year, 2 years, depending on the situation. That's the first thing. What are the risks? The laws, you need to be aware of those laws. And that requires another video on itself, actually. There's a lot of issues in there. The next thing is increasing the rent amount, because if you have a long-term tenant, the rent will be set for the entire year, and if you cannot kick the tenant out, so the next year they will continue as well, unless you have a valid reason, which is you yourself is moving in, and then again taking tenants out is also difficult in the current conditions, because now the tenant has to get out and find another apartment at a very high price. So they'll not be happy. They won't leave very easily, right? Unless you have a very good understanding with them and you're able to convince them somehow. So rent increases. Let's talk about rent increases. So traditionally, the rent increases was done according to the consumer price index known as UFE-TUFE. So this is the consumer price index, which changes year by year according to the inflation, which is the price of goods and services, how much they've changed and so on. It tracks that, and based on that percentage, the government announces that, and you can increase your rent each year for a set percentage, right? So for now, even though inflation has risen, over 70% or whatever the number is, it's extremely high. The government has put in a law that has come into effect on June 2022, on June 8, 2022, that you can only raise the rent up to a 25%. The maximum is 25%. That's capped. Until July 1st, 2023, the rent increase rate has been capped, right? So any increase that you're planning to do within that, after July, within July 1st, you can only increase it 25%. That's the maximum. So technically, you really, even that increase is very minor compared to what's the changes that are going on in terms of the currency. So that basically sums up long-term rentals. These are the issues you're facing when you have a long-term rental tenant and you're using the property as a long-term rental investment. Number one was basically the rights. Basically removing the tenant is very difficult, right? Having any changes with the tenant. Secondly, the rent income as well cannot be changed. So those are the two main issues. Now let's move on to Airbnb investments, right? So that's the third option. First, we said doing nothing, leaving it empty. So you still need to have somebody periodically. Number two is having a long-term tenant. And number three is the exciting route of having an Airbnb property where you have multiple, guests coming in and renting it out and paying whatever the market rate is. So one of the major cons of having an Airbnb is there is considerable cost involved. So in terms of just setting up your apartment itself, with the long-term rental, the tenant is basically paying for everything. Is furnishing the place themselves. They are, unless you offer it as a furnished apartment, then you can raise the rent a little bit further. But again, usually it's not going to be furnished. The tenant furnishes it. They pay for all the electricity, water, even the maintenance fees, which is in other parts of the country paid by the landlord. In Turkey, it's paid by the tenant. The condo maintenance fees or whatever, the monthly or annual maintenance fees that the building has to maintain the swimming pool or the sauna or just keep the building clean and all that. So that is paid by everything is paid by the tenant, right? So the internet bill, whatever, all the bills that are coming, except for the actual maintenance being done on the apartment. Like for example, something breaks, that depends on the contract that you have. But usually, most cases that's covered by the landlord, right? So the shower, or there's a plumbing issue, or there's a leak or whatever. So that is usually that is arranged by the tenant, or arranged by the landlord, depending on the situation. And then the landlord is the one who foots the bill. Right. So that is the number one con. There's high operating costs. There is cost involved. So there's cleaning supplies, bed sheets and so on. There's cleaning costs involved in terms of getting it each time. After every person that stays, every guest that checks in and stays and checks out, then after that there needs to be a cleaning process, right? Don't let this scare you away. Of course, there's ways to do that, but this is the one aspect that we need to be clear about. There is a con, which is the startup cost and ongoing cost that you will have with Airbnb is definitely different from a long-term rental. Now, the pro on this is that these expenses are tax deductible, so you can add them in when you're filing for your tax returns annually, which you do need to do. If you're earning property income in Turkey, you do need to file for those taxes. Now you can do that if you have registered a company as an LLC, you can report it under there, and it's 22%, I believe, this year. Next year it goes down to 20 or 21. So for now, you're looking at about roughly 22% that you're paying on as taxes, and after you obviously deduct all your expenses, right, from that. And so that's one way, or you do it with the personal, as a personal, income. So that would fall into the brackets. They have a bracket system, tier system. The first 20,000 is taxed at, I think, 15%. Then it's like, 20 to 30, 35, whatever is taxed at 20%, then 20, 25, and so on. So there's a tiered system. So you can, depending on, usually if it's just one or, two properties, then as far as depending on, again, how much rent you're getting in, it might be okay to go personal. But if it's more than, let's say, 2-3 properties, then definitely you should consider setting up your LLC and getting everything done through that, so that you can minimize the taxes that you're paying, and you've got everything under one umbrella when you're managing all these properties. Again, speak to your accountant for this. I don't want to be giving out accounting tax advice. This is just generally my observations. Please do your own research, talk to the tax professionals. We do have as well our own tax professionals that we consult with for our clients. So definitely, if that's something that you're looking for, do get in touch, and we can direct you to the professionals. So the other good thing, one of the major advantages of Airbnbs in Turkey is the amount you can charge. So you're charging basically based on the demand and supply, based on the season, based on the foreign currency. You're not basically stuck to the local prices. So you're charging based on the dollar, euro, pound rates, and you're not set to a single rate. In long-term rental, you're set for a single currency, you're set to a certain rent for the entire year, and that's it. Regardless of fluctuations in currency, prices changing everywhere, you're just getting the same amount every single month. But with Airbnb in Turkey, the good thing is that, all that fluctuations that's going on, that kind of, you're kind of not so, susceptible to that sort of risk, because you can charge, dollar, euro rates on your Airbnb properties, and you've got tourists from different countries that are going to be purchasing and booking those properties. So that is a good way to kind of hedge yourself against that, the inflation risk there. And not to mention, in high season, when the demand is very high, you're looking at the market and you're just varying the rates, or whoever is managing your property, if they're doing a good job, they will be maximizing on those seasonal changes when the property prices for the rents go up. Now, the con here for Airbnb properties is that it is going to cost you if you are looking to get it managed. So there's two ways basically when you have an Airbnb. Either you manage it yourself, right? If you're looking to do that, or you get it managed by a professional firm. Right? So if you're managing it by yourself, the only way you can do that is that if you're in the country, obviously, and you're living very nearby. So because you need to hand over the keys to every guest. So you need to be nearby, ideally, if there's any complaints, anything like that. The internet's not working. Oh, the AC, something's weird going on. Or we're out of soap, or we're out of, there's no pots and pans or plates. There's going to be all sorts of things that can happen. So you need to be nearby, ideally, at least for the, for the purposes of having a good control over your property. Now, of course, there are many ways of smoothing this process. Like you can have, electronic keys handover for that. Key boxes that you can, or electronic, locks itself that you can generate a code, and that gives them access to the property where everything's already set beforehand. There's different things that you can do, but generally speaking, you definitely have to be within commuting distance to the property, because you will be looking at that closely. So, and the other thing is that it is time consuming. So if you're managing the property, need to be doing research into the market. You'll need to be setting the rates. You'll need to be responding to guests on, to their inquiries online, and you have a good response rate, trying to be actively marketing the property. So there's all sorts of things that you'll need to be doing when you're managing. Obviously, not to mention arranging the cleaners, supplies, making sure that the apartment's, maintained all the time. After each and every guest, you need to be doing inspections to make sure that things are, kept in the same way. So there's all those sort of things that it is time consuming. So that's a con. So if you're doing it yourself, it's gonna be time consuming. If you're gonna, let's say, give it out to the other option is to give it to another firm, a property management firm that's gonna manage it for you. And these firms will generally charge minimum 15% to anywhere I've seen like 30%, right? So they'll be charging you a percentage of your income, or they may even charge you, they may even strike a deal with you on a yearly basis. So they will say that, we'll give you, let's say, $5,000 or 6,000 euros, whatever it is, for the whole year. You hand us the keys, we'll manage everything. You'll get a flat rate each and every year. So this happens usually in Antalya. I've seen this happen a lot, where they do this, especially for villas. The companies will strike a deal and they'll manage everything and they'll give you a set rate because they know the consistency and they know they can make above that, and they'll make the profit will be above that. So this is one of the models that you can choose. So the next question is it legal to have Airbnb rental properties? Is that operating it legal? Do we need some licenses? Do we need any kind of permissions to do that? The answer to that is that technically speaking, it's not exactly legal. In the sense that, there are some regulations about it. If you look at it formally speaking, you do need to have, number one, permission, written consent from 66% of the entire building. If it's an apartment in a building, then you do need a written consent from all the other 66% of the owners of the apartment building. And you can take that, and then you need to apply for a police permission from the local police station. And then and after that, you do need a municipal license that needs to be applied for with all those documents. Then that gives you the right to actually operate as a Airbnb rental. So do all the investors or all the other property owners, are they following that? In most cases, nobody really does that. They just operate without doing that. It's not very common for people to go and register in that manner because first of all, it's very hard to get written consent from all the owners. 66% of the owners of a building, especially if the building is, let's say, 30 floors or 20 floors, right? There's hundreds of apartments. So you need to be basically getting consent from over 50 people, so 50 owners. So it's a very difficult task. So usually speaking, it doesn't really happen that way on the ground. How do you avoid that, right? So how do you still stay legal in that sense? There is a risk. So that's going to be the risk element. So there's no way to really go around it. The only option is that you can either go and purchase a villa, like a detached house. So for that, then it's simple. You don't need anybody else's permission. You just have to provide your own. You just go and apply and for a police permission and get the municipal license, and now you can operate that as an Airbnb. But before buying that property, you should be consulting, checking with the municipal office and so on beforehand, or you hire a consultant, such as us, to go and look into those things beforehand to make sure that those properties can be utilized as an Airbnb property. Usually what we look for apartments is generally speaking, the written consent is very hard. So what we do look for is that Is it okay, in terms of generally other apartments are being rented out in that same manner, nobody's really complaining, nobody's having an issue with it, then generally speaking, it's fine. So those are some things: the vibe, the area, the neighborhood, the apartment building itself. So certain apartment buildings, like, for example, there was one where there was like all retired people living there. It was a small building, maybe 4 or 5 floors, and all the apartments was like, they didn't want, they wanted people that would just be long-term tenants that are going to be staying. They were very opposed to having weird people coming in and out. So they were just, opposed to that. So in that case, but in another neighborhood, let's say closer to downtown or a more busy area, so over there, nobody really cared, even though it was a small building. I had seen, an owner had converted it, like a 3-bedroom apartment, into 3 single units, actually. So he had made 3 studio units out of a big 3-bedroom apartment, which he was easily renting out, and nobody was complaining. Everyone knew about it, and everyone was familiar with it, and there was no issues. So it really depends, and those are some of the things, some of the small signs that you need to look out for. That's why some of that pre-research goes a long way, and knowing the lay of the land, knowing how things work in Turkey, and knowing the specifics of that neighborhood, of that specific area, the buildings itself in the area, what is the vibe like, and can that be done? So either you can buy villas or you can buy an entire small building. Let's say there's a 2 or 3 floor building, and you just buy the entire building. It consists of, let's say, 2 or 3 apartments in the building itself, and now you've got, the building itself is available, and that now you own the entire building, so you don't have to really go and get anybody's consent for that. So now I want to show you a map of Istanbul with actually, where the concentrated Airbnb apartments currently are, which will give you a good idea of what is working right now in the market. And you can use that as a kind of guide to start off and start exploring as to which areas might be suitable for Airbnbs. And I'll also give you a few tips in that sense here on the channel. So when you look at this map here, where do you see that is most concentrated? Automatically your eye is traveling to the Taksim, Beyoğlu area, the Galata, that area. You can see all the purple dots are there. So that is essentially the main concentration, along with Sultanahmet as well. You can see a whole bunch of Airbnb apartments down there. And towards the Asian side, you do see, Kadıköy has picked up in the last few years, has really picked up in the last 3-4 years. It's starting to pick up and is becoming a recognized spot, whereas it wasn't. Üsküdar, as you can see, is still not there yet. So it's still sort of slowly getting there. And that's where the potential is, where you see like Kadıköy, Üsküdar, these are good potentials as up and coming areas. And of course, the tried and true are the Sultanahmet and Taksim Beyoğlu area, but these, of course, it's very challenging to find something here in these areas which are going to be as a good price value for money, because all the good ones are usually taken, or they usually get hunted down very quickly by people who are already in the business there. So not to say that you can't do it, but it's just a bit more challenging. So you might get more lucky going towards Beşiktaş, going towards Bomonti, Şişli, those areas. You might find more luck there in those regions. Now, where else can you go outside of that? I've marked another spot. You notice on the left hand, on the western side towards Başakşehir, is where the two main highways are crossing. So that is, where basically a Mall of Istanbul, which is one of the biggest malls of Turkey, is located there. Is frequented by tourists, by foreigners, and it's very close to the airport, just like 20-30 minutes away from the airport, right on the highway. So this is a very prime location for people coming in to do business, coming in to do shopping, frequent travelers coming in to see family, friends in Istanbul. They would like to stay not exactly in Sultanahmet or in Taksim, in those areas, because those can get very crowded, busy, Those are very touristic areas. You can't really come in and out very easily, especially if you're driving, if you're renting a car, or even if you're taking a taxi, you'll be stuck in there, for traffic and so on. So that is another potential area for business folks, who are looking to rent quick, for a week or 2 weeks, or even family and friends of those residents living here. So that becomes a spot, even sometimes for frequent tourists who have already seen, who don't really want to go to the old city, but they just want to be in Istanbul and they just want to do some shopping, go travel around. So that area I've marked, which I definitely see as a good potential. There are some good properties in that area, that have the potential to be Airbnb properties. So that's enough secrets for now. For more information, for more detailed analysis and consultations, of course, feel free to get in touch with us at the WhatsApp link below. And don't forget to click, if you're finding this content useful so far, don't forget to click like and subscribe to the channel, and obviously comment below if you've got any feedback, any questions so far. Definitely please like the video. Now let's get to the exciting part, which is basically we're going to take a look at a sample apartment, right, which has both potential for long-term and short-term, and then we'll compare both earnings and see, give you an outlook of what that would look like. So here I've got an apartment here in Batashahir. Batashahir is a complex there near to Mall of Istanbul, right? They've got really high rises there, and I've got an apartment there. Let's say it's like going for about 8,000 liras. 8,000 liras, right? Some of them have even advertised for 9. 1-bedroom apartment, right? So it's a 1+1 1-bedroom apartment. It's going anywhere between 8,000 to 9,000. This one is for 8, but I've seen another one for 8,700. And then you've got a furnished one again. It's for 10,000. So if you furnish it, you may be able to add the, add on the amount there. But again, you can see in the description for this that you need to be paying at least 6 months in cash, right? So a lot of these conditions are going to be there in Istanbul. Some of them are quite, strict on that. So this is the situation. Now let's take a look at the same apartment in the same building. Actually, I've managed to find that. I've actually stayed in this complex before, and I can tell you that it is a very, well-maintained and a very good location as well. So this place is charging about $46 per night, but if you actually add in the fees and everything, the cleaning fees and service fees and all, it adds up to be like around $53, per night. So let's just say it's like around $53 per night, right? So if let's do some calculations now. So 9,000 TL, I'm gonna say for the long term, right? For the long term rental, it's anywhere between 8 to 10, depending on whether it's furnished or not. Let's say 9. So if you look at it annually, you're getting to about, if you do the calculation, let's say $1 is 18.5 Turkish liras. That's giving you $5,800 annually. The same thing now, let's say that's what you get for an annual income on that. Now for the same apartment, if you do it as a short-term rental, and let's just say you're doing it as a 75% capacity occupancy rate. So you're getting a 75% rate, which is in Istanbul not very hard to get. A lot of these times the apartments are quite heavily booked. So that is fine. That's easily doable. So let's say you're getting it at 75%. That means annually speaking, you're making $14,500 gross, not net. So for both calculations, I'm doing a gross calculation, right? So you can kind of estimate your other costs. So let's say if you want to estimate, let's say 30%, if you hire a management company and they're charging you 30%, let's minus that out. So that's going to be 4,350. So let's minus that out of 14,500. So you're left with $10,150. Let's round it up to 10,000. Compare that to 5,800. So you're definitely seeing a considerable difference, right? You're almost doubling the amount that you are, getting, right? So, but worst case scenario, let's say $53 a night, and actually, you know what? Let's go $46. Even if you get like, let's say 50% occupancy, and so I'm gonna do 365 times 50. So 182.5 days, and then times that by 46. So you're still left with $8,395. And let's say if you give this to a professional management firm, you're definitely getting above 50%. But let's say worst case scenario, you minus 30%, and you're roughly about at the same price. You're roughly about $5,800, roughly speaking, right? So you're there at the same amount. If you do 50%, meaning half the year, 6 months, or every month you only get 2 weeks of bookings, which in high season and in good times you might even be like fully booked out. So it's like the worst case scenario, you'll still be able to meet that target, right? So that's what we're looking at. Again, nobody knows, this is a business, so you don't know what's gonna happen. For example, during the pandemic, there were times where these places were very empty at that time, and you can get a steal of a deal, and the prices were very low. So, but right now, as things are, the occupancy rate is very high. It's very high. So things are, full right now, and this is what you're getting for your money. Yeah, let's do this for Antalya now. So for Antalya, I've got an apartment in Konyaaltı. So I've got this apartment in Konyaaltı, Liman area, and it's a two bedroom apartment, 2+1. It's furnished. Most of the apartments are furnished in that region, so it's going for 10,000 liras per month. And it's got a nice view and so on. So now a similar apartment, 2-bedroom, is going for $54 a night, right? So let's do the calculation, right? $54 a night, and see what we come up with. So again, I'm gonna do here 80% occupancy first. So 80% occupancy, so that's 292 days, and times that by 54, that gives me $15,000. $15,768. And if you do the 10,000 TL per month, multiplied by 12, and divide that by 18.5, that gives me 6,486. So this is at 80% capacity, right? So you can see that it's again a double, right? More than double amount. Now if we lower that, if we lower the capacity to, let's say, 50% again, so again I'm going to do it 50%, so we're looking at about 182 days times 54, that's 9,000, wait a second, 9,855. That's at 50% capacity. So that's still a considerable amount. So let's minus out the 30% from here. 30% is almost 3,000. So 9,805 minus 3,000. That leaves me with 6,855. So again, roughly the same as a long-term rental. But if I manage to get 80% capacity, which again, these rates, $54 is his low season rate. So in July, August, June, July, August, you're looking at double the amount. So in winter time, again, it gets to like this rate, basically $50, right? So, but we're just gonna go with this rate for now, right? 15,670, so minus 30% is $4,700, so 15,700 minus $4,700. So you're left with $11,000 for the 80% occupancy rate versus a 6,400, which is also gross. So for long-term rental, again, you're looking at least some maintenance and things like that. So that is not covered here in that amount. So we're just going to ignore that part. So this is what we're looking at. Of course, there is risk when it comes to Airbnb. Again, I'm not going to say this is risk-free. There is risk involved. So just keep that in mind. This is the two kind of analysis that we've done so far. So how do you find the best investment properties for Airbnb? How do you do that? Number one is that you need to be browsing Airbnb. You need to utilize it. You need to try it out. Actually, when you do travel to Turkey, try to look for an Airbnb from that angle and stay in one, experience that, and you'll get an idea for what's available and what's not available. For example, in Antalya, I've noticed that there aren't many modern Airbnb apartments, like the furnishings, the apartment building itself. They're usually old and there's not a lot of options available. So it's a hint. In Istanbul, you do find much more options available, but obviously there's a huge demand for that, and the supply is pretty much also there. But there's always space to stand out, and there's just always demand there in Istanbul. So that's just the nature of the city. And using online tools, analytical tools. So for example, AirDNA is one that you can use. Even like the free version gives you some idea, gives you like the average rates and so on. Like for example, for Istanbul, it gives you like a $59 per night average rate. If you have the pro version, you can kind of get more details as to what's going on. Same thing for Antalya. It tells you that it's $89 per night. But again, like a professional will be able to tell you that why is it 89 is because Antalya has more villas, has more villa options. That's why you're seeing the average go up. When actually Istanbul apartment properties prices are for Airbnb are much higher, in generally speaking. So there are some differences there, and that comes to the third point, is that you need to have ideally someone guiding you who is familiar with the region, who's familiar and knows how the cycle works, what the seasons are like, what the rents are like, what people are paying year by year, and where they're staying, what the experiences are like. So that's where we come in, and you can always utilize us as consultants. Feel free to send us a message. Again, the WhatsApp link is below, and we can discuss and provide consultancy as to where you should be investing and what you should be investing in when it comes to a short-term or long-term rental property. So I just want to give you some general ideas about long-term and short-term rental prices in both Istanbul and Antalya. So in Istanbul, for long-term rental, so you're looking at anywhere right now, we're in September, end of September of 2022. You're looking at a long-term rental prices between anywhere starting from 5,000 is the minimum, probably. You can't really find much lower than that. TL, 5,000 to a 25,000 as an average. Of course, in Istanbul, there's like 50, 100,000, as much as high as you can go. But generally speaking, the nicer, higher and newer apartment buildings will be 25, 30, 35,000 Turkish liras. So roughly you can say 25,000 as more of the higher end. And for the lower end, roughly starting at 5. So right now, that's what you're looking at. If you want something like somewhere in the middle, you're looking at 10, 11 in that range. Right? Short-term rentals in Istanbul, minimum is $40 a night for somewhere. Average is 59 according to, again, DNA. Something actually decent, decently nice, good location, good interiors, some good amenities available. You're looking at about $100 a night. Sea view, in Istanbul, you're paying premium prices, especially if you want an actual proper sea view. Like check out this place, for example, you're looking at about $900 a night. Great furnishings, great sea view, beautiful terrace balcony area. So this kind of place in Istanbul, you're really paying very high premiums. But if you do want a sea view at a steal of a deal, then come to Antalya, obviously. Here you can find much better sea view Airbnbs. Before I do that, let me talk to you about in Antalya the long-term rentals. So long-term rentals are starting anywhere between 3,000 to 15,000 on the higher end. For an average, let's say 2-bedroom apartment. And this is for areas like mainly the main areas of Antalya city, which is Murat Pasha, Konyaaltı, and Kepez. We're not including Doshimaltı or other regions, so this is just those regions. And for the short-term rental, minimum starting at $35 a night in this season, again, mind you, this will not stand for summer high season. Then over there, you're looking at, minimum $75, $60, $60 per night in the high season. Average apartments, probably $50 a night in down season. Up season, you're looking at about, again, 80, roughly in that range. Something really decent. There isn't much options like newer apartments, as I mentioned, furnishings. There isn't a lot out there. So you're really looking at about $100 per night if you really try to find, but there isn't much out there. So that's a good place for investors like yourself to kind of get in there and get something nice going for the market. Sea View, you can get something for $110 here, for example, right now in October. Check out this place. It looks beautiful. You got a nice sea view. You're very close. You're basically, a couple meters away from the sea. Great deal there. Now, lastly, I want to talk to you about is property management. So what are the options of companies that do property management? Here, you need to be careful, obviously, who you trust with doing your property management. There are professional firms, like one actually that stands out right now is a firm that's called Misafir. Now, I haven't really explored it in detail, but I've been hearing things about it. And so far from the overview of it, it seems pretty professional. They charge like 30% per booking, and which includes like all the cleaning, the bed changes, linen changes. They handle the check-in process, changing the soap and shampoo and whatnot, and even handling the guest relations and maintenance and so on for you. So they charge you per booking, which is an interesting model, not as a yearly kind of contract and so on. So they just charge you per booking. They collect the fees for the booking, and then whatever is left, the 70%, they deposit that to your account. Now, I will be looking more into this company, and as I learn more, I'll be sharing more with you about them. But so far, this is one that looks promising. So that's it, folks. That was a complete guide to Airbnb investments in Turkey. Hopefully you found that useful, and if you're looking again to get into this field and looking into investing in Turkey, definitely get in touch with me. You've got my WhatsApp number linked below, and let's go ahead, let's talk and discuss your goals, and let's find you a profitable investment which will not only get you good capital appreciation, but also provide you with a good return on investment in terms of the ROI and in terms of your rent that's coming in. Stay tuned again for more content from us. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and see you next time.